Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're diving into the world of high-frequency trading with Michael Lewis's Flash Boys. Buckle up, because things are about to get fast and furious in the stock market.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
So let's start with spread networks.
Okay.
Back in 2009, they took on this huge project building a straight fiber optic cable from Chicago to New Jersey.
Right.
But it wasn't for like regular internet stuff. It was all about shaving milliseconds off trading times.
Exactly. And it really shows you how much emphasis is placed on speed in modern trading. I mean, every millisecond counts.
Milliseconds, seriously, that seems like such a tiny amount of time.
I know it sounds crazy, but think about it like this.
Okay.
Every thousandth of a second can be the difference between making or losing millions of dollars for these high-frequency traders.
Oh, wow. So it's like a race against time.
It is. It's a constant battle to be faster than everyone else.
So Spread Networks is literally digging tunnels through mountains and dealing with all sorts of legal stuff just to make trading a tiny bit faster. I mean, why go through all that trouble?
Well, Flash Boys really digs into this whole idea that speed became the ultimate weapon in trading.
So what's the big advantage of being that fast? Give me an example.
Okay, imagine you're trying to buy a certain stock.
Okay.
You put in your order, but before it can even go through a high-frequency trader with their crazy fast connection, sees your order coming. They then buy that same stock before you and then turn around and sell it to you at a higher price.
Whoa, wait. So they're like cutting in line and making money off me before I even have a chance.
Exactly. And that's just one example of how high-frequency trading can really tilt the playing field.
I mean, is that even legal?
It's called front-running, and it's one of the many tactics Lewis exposes in the book.
That sounds super shady, but Flash Boys isn't just about cables and connections, right?
Right. It also dives into the human side of this.
Okay.
People who started to suspect that something wasn't quite right with the market.
Like they were being cheated.
Kind of, yeah. One of the key figures in the book is Brad Katsuyama, a trader at RBC. He was using these sophisticated algorithms to make trades, and they were working great.
Okay.
But then they suddenly started failing.
Like, what do you mean failing?
Like not making money the way they used to.
So he's like, hold up, my system was working before. Something's changed.
Yeah, basically. And that's when he starts to realize that high-frequency traders are exploiting the system.
How so?
Well, they were taking advantage of these really complex market structures.
Like
Things like maker-taker fees.
maker-taker what?
Maker-taker fees. There are these rebates that are paid to certain traders for providing liquidity. And then there's something called payment for order flow.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, where brokers actually sell their clients' orders to these high-frequency trading firms.
Wait, hold on. Brokers are selling my orders, like to these high-speed traders.
It happens more than you think.
Isn't that like a conflict of interest? I mean, aren't they supposed to be working for me?
It's definitely something that raises a lot of questions about whether the market is really fair and transparent.
It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Lewis is getting at in Flash Boys.
So Katsuyama's realizing the extent of this manipulation.
Right.
He's got to do something, right?
He teams up with Ronan Ryan, a telecom expert who really knows the ins and outs of high-frequency trading.
Interesting. So they've got the trader sees the problem firsthand and the tech guy who knows how it all works behind the scenes.
Exactly. And Ryan really starts to unveil all the crazy things these high-frequency trading firms were doing to get an edge.
Like what? Spill the tea?
They were spending huge amounts of money to co-locate, which means they were placing their servers right next to the exchange's servers.
Wow. So they're basically trying to get as physically close as possible.
Absolutely. They were obsessed with every tiny detail, down to the type of glass used in the fiber optic cables.
I can't believe it. It sounds so intense.
It was. It really was a whole different world.
So Katsuyama's got all this information. He can't just sit on it. What did he do?
He and his team at RBC developed a tool called Thor.
Thor, like this superhero.
Yep. It was their weapon to fight back against this high-frequency trading.
Awesome. So how did Thor work?
It was designed to level the playing field.
Okay.
It would send orders to all the exchanges simultaneously, so it neutralized the speed advantage that the high-frequency traders had.
Clever. So did it work?
It did, but the reaction to Thor was mixed.
What do you mean?
Some investors were totally shocked and angry when they realized how the market was actually working.
Yeah, I bet.
But others were more hesitant to change what they were doing, even though it was clear they were at a disadvantage.
That's crazy. Why wouldn't they want to use Thor?
I think it was a mix of skepticism and just plain old resistance to change.
Makes sense. Old habits die hard, right?
Exactly. And it became clear that exposing the problem wasn't going to be enough.
So they needed to do something more drastic.
Yep. That's where the idea for IEX, the new stock exchange, came from.
Oh, right. We gotta talk about IEX. I've heard so much about it.
It was a bold move.
Yeah, IEX was like their way of saying, we're gonna build a better system from the ground up.
Exactly, and that's exactly what they set out to do.
So what made IEX so different? I mean, how did they actually slow down the high-frequency traders?
They actually did something that seemed counterintuitive at first.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They built this 38-mile coil of fiber optic cable.
Wait, so they actually slowed things down on purpose. Why would they do that?
It sounds crazy, but this cable created a tiny delay for all incoming orders.
Okay.
The delay was so small that regular investors wouldn't even notice it.
Right.
But for high-frequency traders, those precious microseconds were lost.
Oh, I see. So it was like a speed bump for the high-frequency traders.
It was. And it was a brilliant way to neutralize their advantage.
Genius. I bet Wall Street wasn't too thrilled about this new kid on the block.
You're right. IEX faced a ton of pushback from the established exchanges and the big banks. They didn't want things to change.
That makes sense. I mean, they were profiting from the old system.
Exactly.
So even though IEX was trying to make the market fairer for everyone, they became a target.
It really shows you how deeply entrenched the existing system was. Those in power weren't going to give up their advantage without a fight.
It's like they were trying to crush IEX before it could even get off the ground.
Exactly.
This is already such a crazy story. I can't wait to hear more about IEX's battle with Wall Street.
Oh, there's a lot more to come.
Ew.
But before we get into that, let's talk about something that happened in the middle of all this. The flash crash of 2010.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. The market just tanked out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was a wild ride. And a perfect example of the kind of instability that Flash Boys exposes.
The market just plummeted and then recovered super quickly.
Right, and no one really knew what caused it.
I remember feeling really scared, like what if it never recovered?
I think a lot of people felt that way.
So what did cause it?
Well, the SEC blamed it on a single large order.
Just one order.
Yeah, but a lot of people, including Katsuyama, found that explanation pretty unconvincing.
Yeah, how could one order cause all that chaos?
Exactly. The flash crash really highlights the lack of transparency in the market.
And the fact that even the regulators didn't fully understand how it was operating.
Right. And when things go wrong in a system you don't understand, it's hard to know how to fix it.
It's a little scary to think about.
It is. It's like a warning sign that things could go very wrong very quickly.
So it was like a glimpse of how fragile the system had become.
Exactly. It really makes you think about who's really in control.
Yeah, I was calling the shots here. The traders, the algorithms, the regulators. It's a good question.
It is. And that's where IEX's story becomes even more important.
They weren't just building a new exchange. They were trying to create a whole new way of thinking about the market.
Exactly. And their fight for legitimacy is just beginning.
Oh man, this is getting intense. I can't wait to hear what happens next with IEX and this whole high-frequency trading world.
We'll dive into all of that in part 2.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into Flash Boys. Last time, we saw how IEX was trying to build a fairer stock market, but faced a ton of resistance from the Wall Street giants.
Yeah, it was like David versus Goliath.
Totally. So how did IEX even begin to take on these powerful forces?
Well, they realized that to really change things, they couldn't just play by the old rules.
Okay.
They had to attract people who were kind of disillusioned with Wall Street.
People who wanted to do things differently.
Exactly. People who believed in IEX's mission of fairness and transparency.
So like Zoran, the NASDAQ engineer who had witnessed the aftermath of 9/11 and was looking for a more ethical way to work in finance?
Right. Soren's story really highlights how these systems are made up of individuals who have their own values and beliefs.
It's a reminder that we're not just talking about algorithms and numbers here.
Exactly. We're talking about people making choices about the kind of world they want to create.
And there was also John Schwal, who came from Credit Suisse.
Oh yeah, John Schwal was on a mission to expose the hypocrisy of Wall Street.
He was really passionate about making things fairer for investors.
He was. He really dug deep to uncover the connections between these big firms and the world of high-frequency trading.
So he was like a detective uncovering a conspiracy?
Kind of. He meticulously built these organizational charts showing the career paths of people from Credit Suisse.
What did those charts show?
They revealed how deeply intertwined these firms were with the practices that were harming investors.
Whoa, that's crazy.
It was. It really showed how the game was rigged against ordinary people.
So they had this vision, a dedicated team, and proof that something was wrong. But how do you actually convince the rest of the market that IEX is the better option?
They knew they had to prove themselves to show that their market was truly different.
And they couldn't just say it, they had to show it.
Exactly. They realized the traditional ways of measuring market performance were kind of misleading.
Oh, so they couldn't rely on the existing metrics?
Nope. They had to create their own.
Okay, that's interesting. So how did they do that?
IEX decided to publish their own statistics,
Showing what?
highlighting the key metrics that proved their market was fairer and more transparent.
So they were like, here are the numbers, just for yourself.
Yeah, it was a really bold move, a way of challenging the status quo.
I mean, did it work?
It started to. They were able to show that the average trade size on IEX was bigger and that there was less predatory activity.
Okay, that makes sense. But surely the big banks didn't just sit back and watch this happen.
No, they fought back hard.
What did they do?
They spread rumors, they tried to discredit IEX, they even threatened some of their employees.
Really? They threatened them?
Yeah. Lewis talks about this one incident where a Bank of America employee joked about sending some Irish guys after an IEX employee.
That's insane.
It really shows the length they were willing to go to protect their interests.
So it was a pretty hostile environment.
It was. But IEX stood their ground.
So how did they deal with these attacks? Did they fight fire with fire?
They decided to double down on their commitment to transparency.
Okay, so how did they do that?
They brought in this guy, Josh Blackburn, who was a former military data analyst.
Interesting. What did he bring to the table?
He helped them visualize the data in a way that was easy for everyone to understand.
So they were using data to tell a story.
Exactly. They were able to show, in a really compelling way, how high-frequency traders were manipulating the market.
And these visualizations must have been pretty convincing, right?
They were. Because they were based on hard data, it was difficult to refute them.
So IEX was fighting back with facts.
Yeah, it was their most powerful weapon.
But what about the regulators? Weren't they supposed to be keeping things fair?
That's a good question. The book kind of suggests that the regulators were outmatched.
Like they couldn't keep up with the speed of technology.
Exactly. The market was moving so fast and was so complex that it was hard for them to even see what was happening, let alone regulate it.
So IEX is fighting the establishment, battling these powerful forces, and trying to navigate a confusing regulatory landscape.
It was a lot to handle, but they managed to gain some powerful allies along the way.
Oh yeah, we talked about Goldman Sachs in the last part.
Right. Goldman routing a big chunk of their orders to IEX was a huge validation.
I mean, Goldman is like the ultimate Wall Street insider.
Totally. So for them to embrace IEX was a really big deal.
Why do you think Goldman decided to support them?
It's hard to say for sure,
Huh.
but maybe they realized that the speed game was becoming unsustainable.
Like maybe they saw the writing on the wall.
Possibly. Plus, there was growing public scrutiny of high-frequency trading, and Goldman might have wanted to get ahead of that.
It makes sense. They don't want to be seen as the bad guys, right?
Exactly. And then there was that group of 16 investors who controlled trillions of dollars.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
They also threw their support behind IEX.
So it was like a vote of confidence from some of the biggest players in the game?
It was. And it sent a clear signal to the rest of the market that IEX was a force to be reckoned with.
Amazing. So they're starting to gain some real momentum.
They are. And it really highlights the power of collective action, of people coming together to demand change.
Yeah, this whole story is really inspiring.
It is. It shows that even in a system as powerful and entrenched as Wall Street, change is possible.
But I have to ask, did IEX ultimately succeed?
Well, Flash Boys ends on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Oh no, don't leave me hanging.
Goldman's support and those investors were huge victories.
Right.
But the fight was far from over. The future of IEX and the market was still very much up in the air.
So it's like a story that's still being written.
Exactly.
Well, this part has been a roller coaster. We've seen how IEX fought for legitimacy, how they used data to expose the truth, and how they gained some unlikely allies.
And we've seen how, even in the face of intense opposition, people can come together to fight for a better system.
I can't wait to hear about the final chapter of this story.
Well, in part 3, we'll dive into the strange case of Serge Alinikhov, the Goldman programmer, and explore how his story adds another layer of complexity to this whole saga.
Stay tuned. It's about to get even more interesting. Welcome back to our final deep dive into Flash Boys. We've covered a lot of ground, from the race for speed to the battle for a fairer market. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore. The story of Serge Alininkov, the Goldman Sachs programmer.
Yeah, Alenikov's story really adds a whole other dimension to this whole high-frequency trading saga.
It's like a story within a story, right?
It is. And it really gets to the heart of what Lewis is trying to expose about Wall Street.
Which is?
The culture of secrecy, the fear, the paranoia.
Okay, I'm listening.
So Aleninkov, this brilliant programmer, gets arrested for downloading code from Goldman Sachs.
Right, and Goldman goes after him with everything they've got.
Exactly. They called the FBI, they pressed charges, they made it a huge deal.
But why? I mean, was the code really that valuable?
Well, that's the thing. The code itself wasn't even that groundbreaking. A lot of it was based on open source software.
So it's not like he stole the secret formula for Coke.
Nope. But Goldman's reaction really reveals their own insecurities.
Like they were afraid of what he might do with the code, even if it wasn't that special.
Exactly. And by making such a big fuss about it, they basically admitted that their code was valuable enough to steal.
It's like they shot themselves in the foot.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
And it backfired in a big way because Alenikov's case went to trial.
Twice. Right.
Yeah. And in the second trial, the jurors, a lot of whom had backgrounds in finance and tech, didn't buy Goldman's arguments.
They didn't believe that he was a dangerous threat.
Nope. They saw him as a pawn in Goldman's game.
Like they were trying to make an example of him.
Exactly. It was a warning to other programmers. Don't even think about leaving with our code.
Wow. It's kind of messed up when you think about it.
It is. And what's fascinating is that Aleninkov himself seems remarkably calm throughout all of this.
Yeah, he almost seems detached from the whole ordeal.
It's like he's observing it all from a distance.
I mean, I guess when you're that smart, maybe you see the world a little differently.
Maybe. But it's a good reminder that even in the midst of chaos and injustice, it's possible to maintain a sense of perspective.
So we've got spread networks digging tunnels, Brad Katsuyama building a new exchange, Serge Aleninkov getting caught in this corporate drama, and then Lewis ends the book by going on this bike ride through Pennsylvania.
Yeah, with the Women's Adventure Club. It's kind of a strange ending.
It is. What's that all about?
I think Lewis is trying to bring the story full circle.
Okay.
We started with cables and tunnels, and now we're back in the physical world, biking through the countryside.
Yeah.
He describes these microwave towers that are hidden in plain sight, carrying the signals that drive the stock market.
So even though we think of the market as this digital thing, it's still dependent on the physical world.
Exactly. And those towers can be manipulated just like the market itself.
It's like a reminder that even in this age of technology, the physical world still matters.
It does. And the women he's riding with represent a different set of values. They're adventurous, they're resilient, they value community.
And those are not exactly values that we associate with Wall Street.
Nope. So it's like he's contrasting these two worlds, the ruthless world of high-frequency trading and the simple joy of a bike ride with friends.
I like that. It's a nice way to end the book on a hopeful note.
It is. And it leaves us with some important questions to think about.
Like what?
Like, what kind of market do we want? Who should it benefit? And how can we make sure that technology is used for good and not just for profit?
It's a lot to consider.
It is, but it's important that we keep having these conversations.
Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey. We've uncovered a lot of secrets, met some fascinating characters, and learned a ton about how the market really works.
It's been a wild ride, for sure.
I hope you've enjoyed joining us on this exploration of Flash Boys. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
It definitely makes you think differently about the world of finance.
It does, and that's what makes it so powerful. It challenges us to question the status quo and to demand a fairer system for everyone. Thanks for listening.